Hey folks, welcome back to True Crime Stories, where we cover the most thrilling true crime stories. Before we get going, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for me. Thanks. And now let's get into today's story.
Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going deep on a case that has small-town secrets, a really shocking murder, and a whole bunch of suspects that'll have you guessing right up to the end.
Wow, sounds intriguing.
It is. We're diving into the Jake Hawkins case from Maplewood.
Ooh.
And let me tell you, the stuff you sent over, it's just gripping.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we've got police reports, we have witness statements, local news articles, the whole 9 yards.
Nice.
So what really jumped out at me first was just the setting.
Mm.
Maplewood. It sounds like this picture-perfect town.
Yeah.
You know, surrounded by all this beautiful farmland. And they're known for having this really close community. They even had this big annual harvest festival.
Oh, I love those.
Right. But as we're going to see, even in a place like Maplewood, you know, things aren't always what they seem. There's darkness underneath.
Small towns, man, they always have something going on.
Exactly.
Mm.
And it's that contrast, right, between that perfect image and then the brutal reality of what happened. That's what makes this case so fascinating. So let's talk about Jake Hawkins. Who was he and what made him such a big deal in Maplewood?
Well, from what I've read, he was way more than just a farmer. Like, everybody really looked up to him. He was a pillar of that community,
Yeah.
totally dedicated to sustainable farming. He wanted to protect Maplewood's farming legacy.
Mm.
And he was really into sharing his knowledge, too. Like, he even put together the town seed swap every year. People love that.
So he really was the heart of Maplewood's farming community.
I'd say so, yeah.
But then, you know, there's this big conflict brewing about a proposed agribusiness deal,
Well,
right?
yeah, that was a huge turning point for the town, and probably for Jake himself, too.
Yeah, for sure.
So this big agribusiness company, they wanted to, move into Maplewood. They were making all these promises about jobs and economic growth.
Sure. Typical.
Right. But a lot of the residents, especially the farmers, they saw it as a huge threat, like to their entire way of life.
Yeah.
Especially the kind of traditional, sustainable practices that Jake was all about.
Right. So it was this whole, like, progress versus tradition thing, you know?
Yeah.
Big business against small-town values.
Absolutely.
And Jake, he was right there leading the fight against this deal.
Oh, yeah. He was super vocal about it, organizing protests, even going to town council meetings to speak out against it.
Right.
He truly believed that this deal was going to put profits ahead of people, that it would just destroy the environment and hurt the whole community.
He was a real activist.
He was.
Which makes his murder even more just unsettling.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's get into the crime itself. It all went down on the night of the Harvest Festival during a crazy storm. It's like straight out of a spooky movie.
It's wild, right? I mean, you've got this festival going on. Everyone's supposed to be celebrating and being all, close-knit community. And then, bam, it turns into a horror show.
And the storm, too. Like with the pouring rain, the wind howling, it just adds this layer of creepiness. You know?
Oh, absolutely.
And then in the middle of all that chaos, they find Jake dead in his own cornfield.
Yeah, such a disturbing image.
The source material, it goes into a lot of detail about the crime scene. Like, they found his body hidden under a bunch of freshly cut corn.
Oh, wow.
There were signs of a struggle.
Yeah.
And the attack itself was just brutal.
Yeah, the police reports specifically talk about injuries that make it seem like a really personal, almost angry attack. Deep scratches on his arms, bruising on his neck, and a really bad head wound. This wasn't just some random act. This was personal. Someone wanted him quiet, and they didn't care how they did it.
Yeah, they wanted to make sure he was gone.
Totally.
So let's talk suspects. This is where things get really interesting. The files highlight a whole bunch of people who had motives, maybe opportunity, and even reasons to want Jake gone. First up, Mayor Helen Prescott.
Yeah, the ambitious mayor. She was all about that agribusiness deal. She thought it was going to be like the key to Maplewood's future, economically.
Right.
And Jake, with all his protesting and stuff, not exactly her favorite person, I guess.
Actually, the police reports, they even mention a big argument between them just a few days before the murder. She even threatened him, said she'd deal with him if he didn't back down.
Ooh, spicy.
She claimed she was home during the storm, but her alibi wasn't exactly rock solid. Her husband was out of town, and no one else could back up her story.
Motive and a questionable alibi.
Yeah.
Not a good combo for the mayor.
Definitely not. Okay, next up, suspect number 2, Tommy Lang, Jake's childhood friend.
Right.
They weren't as close anymore, but they had that shared past, you know.
Seems like a complicated past from what I read. Tommy was struggling with alcoholism, and I got the sense that he felt like he was always in Jake's shadow.
Really?
Yeah, Jake was the successful farmer, the respected guy in town, and Tommy was just not.
And this is where it gets juicy. When Detective Ramirez, he was the lead investigator, when he searched Tommy's farm, he found something pretty incriminating.
Oh.
Jake's heirloom pendant. It was missing, and it had been a gift from someone named Eve, who was really close to Jake. So it was like very sentimental.
Yeah, that was a huge turning point in the whole investigation. Tommy said he'd found it in a field months ago, but his story it didn't really add up, and he was a mess during the questioning.
Oh, like emotionally?
Yeah, just all over the place. Grief, anger, and, what really seemed like guilt.
Wow. So we've got a mayor with a motive and a shaky alibi, and a childhood friend with a suspicious find and a ton of baggage. This is already a tangled web.
And we're just getting started. There's more suspects to unpack, each with their own secrets and reasons to maybe want Jake gone.
Okay, lay it on me. Who else is there?
Well, there's Grace Turner, Eve's grandmother. She was like super rooted in Maplewood, a real defender of those old school farming ways. She and Jake, they had a history together, like a bond over their love of the land,
Yeah. So she probably wasn't too thrilled about that agribusiness deal either, right? Like Jake.
Probably not. But, even the quietest people can have strong feelings, especially when their values are threatened. And Grace, even though she seemed sweet, she was fiercely protective of her family and her heritage.
That makes sense. And what about her alibi?
Vague. She said she was home alone, tending her herb garden. But nobody could confirm that, not for the important times anyway. And then there's her whole thing with herbal remedies that got the investigators thinking.
Herbal remedies? What do you mean?
Well, some plants can be used for healing, but they can also be harmful. It all depends on the dose and, well, the intention. And Grace knew a lot about that stuff, so it couldn't be ignored.
Okay, this just got even more interesting. We have the ambitious mayor, the troubled friend, and now the mysterious grandma with her secret plant knowledge. Who else is on the list?
Oh, we can't forget Marla Dawson.
Who's that?
The big shot agribusiness executive, the one pushing for the deal. She saw Jake as a major roadblock and wasn't shy about saying how much she disliked his old-fashioned ways.
Sounds like a classic corporate villain. Did they find anything that tied her to the crime scene?
Well, she claimed she was at some fancy farmer's thing miles away that night. But the police reports show some holes in her story.
Oh, really?
Yeah, some folks who were at the event couldn't remember seeing her at the crucial times. And then cell phone records put her near Maplewood that evening.
Uh-oh. That's not good.
Nope. Plus, her relationship with Jake was, let's just say, not friendly. Witnesses said they'd had some pretty heated arguments in the weeks before the murder. There were even rumors that she was trying to, sabotage his farm using her connections.
Yikes. This is already a pressure cooker of motives and secrets. But wait, there's one more suspect, right?
You got it. The reports mention a Rachel Ellis.
Oh, right. Fill me in.
She was Jake's ex-girlfriend, and their breakup wasn't pretty.
Uh-oh. What happened?
Jealousy, resentment, the whole 9 yards. She felt like he'd chosen his farm and his activism over her, and she just never really got over it.
The scorned lover.
Yeah.
Classic. But was there anything solid linking her to the murder?
Her alibi for that night was shaky. She said she was at a bar outside of town, but the bartender couldn't really confirm when she got there or left. And get this, witnesses saw her car near Jake's farm earlier that day. She said it was a coincidence, but...
Yeah, coincidence. So we've got a whole bunch of suspects, each with their own reasons to want Jake quiet.
Absolutely. This is going to be a wild ride.
I'm hooked already. So where do we go from here?
Well, next up, we're going to really dig into the investigation. We'll untangle all those threads, the physical evidence, the emotional stuff, all the secrets and lies. It's going to be a wild ride. Buckle up.
Sounds good to me.
Oh.
Okay, so we've got these 5 suspects, right? And they each have their own weird relationship with Jake. And a reason maybe to want him gone. So where does the detective even begin with this whole mess?
It's really interesting how Detective Ramirez went about this. He didn't just focus on each suspect, one by one. He looked at the bigger picture, how they all connected to the crime.
Yeah, that makes sense. It wasn't just some random act of violence, it was tied to what was going on in Maplewood. So how did he start, connecting the dots?
He started with the physical evidence, the forensic stuff. Because those details, they often tell their own story. Remember those hair fibers they found at the crime scene?
Yep.
The ones that looked like they came from uniforms worn by people who worked for the agribusiness company.
Right. That was a big deal. It seemed like it pointed right at Marla Dawson.
Yep. And it gets even more interesting when you factor in the soil samples from the scene. They have traces of those heavy-duty pesticides.
Oh, like the kind of small-town farmer like Jake would never use.
Exactly.
So they weren't just random. They were specific to the agribusiness company.
Totally. And it contradicts Marla's whole thing about never being near Jake's farm. Her alibi starts to fall apart right there.
Okay, so they have evidence that puts Marla at the scene, but what about the other suspects? Did they find anything solid on them?
Well, remember Grace Turner, Eve's grandma?
Yeah, she was the one with the not-so-great alibi about her herb garden, right?
Right. And then there's the whole thing about her knowledge of plants.
Yeah, the medicinal stuff, but also the, I guess, the poisonous stuff, too.
Exactly. The detective, he didn't immediately connect it, but he kept it in mind. As he went over the reports, he noticed something. There were traces of this weird plant extract on Jake's clothes. And get this, according to what I read, that extract, it could come from a specific type of herb. And guess who was known to grow that herb in her garden?
Grace.
Grace.
Hold on, are you saying she might have used her plants to hurt Jake? That's a pretty serious accusation.
It is serious, but we're talking about someone who was deeply connected to the land, to the old ways. If she believed that Jake's, activism was putting all that at risk, who knows what she might have done.
It's scary to think about how, seemingly harmless stuff can have a dark side.
Absolutely. It reminds us that knowledge can be powerful, for good or for bad. But, we shouldn't jump to conclusions. Detective Ramirez, he didn't just focus on the physical stuff. He also wanted to understand, the emotional landscape of Maplewood.
Yeah, the relationships, all those unspoken tensions that don't show up in a lab report.
Right. He spent hours going over interview transcripts, looking for patterns, any little clues. And what he found was a community full of secrets, jealousies, and grudges that went way back.
So it was about getting into the minds of the suspects, figuring out what made them tick, and what might push them over the edge.
Exactly. The interviews with Tommy Lang were really something.
What do you mean?
He was just torn up, obviously grieving for Jake, but there was also this resentment that had been building for years. He kept saying how Jake was always the golden boy, the one who could do no wrong, and he was stuck in Jake's shadow.
It's almost like sibling rivalry, but with much higher stakes. Did anything he said make it seem like he might actually hurt Jake?
Hard to say. He never confessed, but you could tell he was holding something back. He knew more than he was letting on. And then there's that whole pendant thing. Why was it at his place? Was it planted, or was there something darker going on?
So many questions. What about the mayor and Rachel? Did the detective learn anything new about them?
Oh, yeah, he did. Remember how the mayor's alibi about being home alone wasn't so great? Well, she wasn't being totally honest. Phone records showed she'd made a bunch of calls that night.
During the storm?
Yeah, including one to a number they traced back to a burner phone.
A burner phone? That's shady. Who was she talking to?
They never found out, couldn't track down the owner, but it just adds to the mystery, right? It implies she was involved in something she didn't want anyone to know about.
Like a double life, the respectable mayor, and then this secret side. But how did that connect to Jake?
It's hard to say for sure, but it makes you wonder, right? Was she using that phone to talk to someone involved in the murder? Was she, the mastermind behind it all?
Okay, so the mayor's starting to look a lot more suspicious now. What about Rachel? Anything concrete on her?
Not really. No direct physical evidence, but remember how she said she was at that bar outside of town?
Yeah, and the bartender couldn't confirm the times.
Right. So when the police checked the security footage from the bar, they noticed something. She arrived alone, but she left with someone.
Ooh, a mystery man.
And his face was hidden in the shadows. They tried to identify him, but no luck. It's like he just vanished.
Just so many twists. Was he involved? Was he her alibi? What's going on?
We've got all these pieces, right? The physical evidence, the emotions, the secrets. It's like a giant puzzle, but with some important pieces still missing.
So how does it all come together? What happened next?
Well, that's where things took an even more unexpected turn, and that's what we'll dive into next.
Okay, so we've got Marla with her shaky alibi and those links to the crime scene, Grace and her plant knowledge, Tommy with all his emotional baggage and that weird thing with the pendant, the mayor making secret calls, and Rachel sneaking out with a mystery man. It's a lot. Did the detective, did he ever narrow it down?
He did, and it all came down to the money. He went deep into the financial records for both Marla and Mayor Prescott.
So it wasn't just personal stuff. He thought there might be like a money motive.
You got it. And what he found was, honestly, shocking. Turns out the mayor was secretly moving money from the town's budget into this, shell corporation connected to Marla.
Wait, what?
Yeah, and if that agribusiness deal had happened, that shell corporation would have made a ton of money.
So it wasn't just progress versus tradition. It was about greed and dirty money.
Hmm.
But where does Jake fit into this? Did he know what was going on?
It seems like he was getting close to figuring it out. In the days before he died, he was asking a lot of questions about the town's money. He even told some friends he thought something shady was happening.
So he was a threat to their whole plan. They couldn't let him expose them.
Exactly. It's like corruption gone wrong. They thought they could control Jake, but they underestimated him. And it cost him his life.
That's awful. But did the detective have enough to actually charge them with murder?
He knew he needed more than just the money stuff, something concrete, something that tied them directly to the crime. And then there was this big break.
What happened? Tell me.
Remember that burner phone the mayor was using? The detective never stopped trying to track it down, and finally, he got lucky.
He figured it out.
He did. Old school detective work plus some tech stuff. He linked the phone to a prepaid account bought with cash at a store outside of town, and guess who they saw in the security footage buying it?
No way. Marla.
Marla. So she wasn't just talking to the mayor in secret. She was the one who made sure those conversations stayed hidden.
Wow, that's huge.
It was the missing piece. Now he could connect Marla directly to the whole thing. So he went to confront both Marla and the mayor.
Okay, what happened? Did they confess?
Well, with all that evidence, they both cracked. Marla admitted to the money scheme, but said she acted alone when she went to see Jake. She said his death was an accident, that things got out of hand during their argument.
But we know it wasn't an accident, right? The reports show a brutal attack.
Exactly. The detective didn't buy it either. He thought she was protecting someone with even more to lose.
You mean the mayor?
The evidence pointed that way. Phone records showed that Marla called the mayor's burner phone right after leaving Jake's farm that night. The call was short, less than a minute. Probably Marla letting the mayor know that, the problem was taken care of.
It's so cold how they talk about it like that. Like Jake's life meant nothing.
It shows how ruthless they were. They didn't care who they hurt to get what they wanted.
So, did they get what they deserved?
In a way, yes. They were both arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit murder and fraud, too. The trial was huge. It really showed what was lurking under Maplewood's perfect image.
What happened in the end?
Marla was found guilty on all charges and got life in prison. The mayor, though, she got a plea deal.
What?
She testified against Marla, spilled the whole story about their plan and how they covered up Jake's murder. So she got a shorter sentence, 15 years.
That doesn't seem fair.
It's how it goes sometimes. Justice isn't always perfect, but Jake's death wasn't for nothing. It led to big changes in Maplewood. The agribusiness deal was canceled, and they put in stricter rules about the town's finances.
So in a way, Jake's fight continued even after he was gone.
Absolutely. It's a powerful reminder that even when things are bad, one person's bravery can make a difference.
Wow. Well, listeners, that's it for our deep dive into the Jake Hawkins case. We went through the evidence, the motives, all the twists and turns that revealed this whole world of corruption and betrayal.
It just shows that even in the quietest places, bad things can happen, and the people in charge, they don't always care about what's right.
It's a reminder to be careful, to question authority, and to never stop fighting for what you believe in.
And remember the people like Jake, the ones who speak up against power, even when it's risky.
That's right. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.